This week's episode picks up right where episode 3 wrapped. We watch Lily, Ronnie, Will, and Rich roll into the station with their graveyard photos. Rich drops the funniest line of the whole episode saying, "We have one where this thing looks like the monster version of Teddy," which was incredibly scary. Meanwhile, the ghosts no longer show up in the shots, and the clown in the distance stays put, but Chief Bowers and his crew treat it like a random statue and warn the kids to back off in a hostile way. Later, Lily meets Juniper Hill housekeeper Ingrid, who promised last week to believe anything her little buddy brings up. Ingrid confirms a run of child deaths in Derry during the 1930s. She hasn't heard anything similar to what the squad deals with right now, though she still pushes Lily to keep digging. Meanwhile, over coffee at the Hanlon home, Rose tries to pull a little intel from Charlotte about the Air Force pipeline rumor, though nothing slips. When Charlotte brings up the string of disappearances, Rose dodges the direct talk and drops a line about keeping the people you love close. Soon after, Charlotte finds Will's cemetery photos and pushes for answers. She gets part of the truth from him, mainly that he cares about Ronnie, then tells her son he's grounded to school and the house until she figures out what's going on around here. Meanwhile, out in the woods, Leroy goes fishing with Will. He heads back to the car for another lure, and during that moment, a strange fish, a clownfish of all things, pulls Will's attention. Then he gets yanked underwater by a scorched arm. The burned image of his father rises in front of him and growls, "You'll burn too." A shaken Will tells Leroy the figure looked like that photo of him after the war when his plane went down. Will's arms are marked and bleeding. Father and son both spot a red balloon floating by. The kid actors keep carrying the show, and Blake Cameron James gives Will more depth this week. Later in his room, Will uses his telescope and spots the clown's silhouette looking right at him. Still no full view of Pennywise. After 4 weeks, Leroy rushes into the street ready for trouble and only finds another red balloon. Hanlon's talent for pushing past fear faces real strain. Later, Charlotte heads to the police station and asks Chief Bowers if Hank Grogan might be innocent. Since there could be another killer out there, Bowers acts like his usual self and blocks her from speaking with Hank. After that, she stops by the Grogan home and talks with his mother. Luella Charlotte explains she was active in the movement, helping other black folks who had been pushed into false confessions. Luella signs a letter clearing her to visit. Charlotte tries again at the station, and the cops shut her down a second time. She pushes back and tells one officer she can show him all the scary stuff she can do with a telephone. She adds that if they refuse her again, by morning, MLK, JFK, RFK, and a bus full of freedom riders will be breathing down their necks while singing, "We shall overcome" in the streets. The officer folds. Later, she meets Hank and promises he'll get moved to home arrest after being held without due process. Charlotte asks where he truly was during the theater massacre and says the answer might clear him. Hank confesses he was with a married white woman, a situation he says happened without planning. He lays out the danger with a heavy voice. If anyone finds out, he won't end up in Shawshank. They will find a tree and her husband will come for her too. He says if there is a path out where nobody gets hurt, he wants it. Back home, Leroy tells Charlotte not to go looking for trouble. We learn she has been arrested before over her activism. She fires back with, "There's gonna be trouble anywhere we go. That's the country you swore your life to defend. I'm making it worth defending." Meanwhile, in the military storyline, Halloran and the other black airmen finally get the space they pushed him for last episode. It is a decommissioned requisition shed. The place looks rough and covered in webs, yet they start mapping out plans for music, a bar, and a small kitchen. Dick ends up quiet for a moment before they get to cleaning and sharing drinks. When he steps outside, his shine hits again. His grandmother appears for a second warning. "Mind me now. Watch yourself, you hear? Keep that lid on tight." Something feels off after his mind was dragged into Pennywise lair. Leroy shows up and presses Dick about what Operation Precept is really hiding, asking if some machine that messes with your head vanished. Dick shouts that he does not know what any of it is and is not sure he wants to. Hanlon reaches his breaking point and storms into General Shaw's office, demanding answers. He gets taken to watch Dick interrogate Taniel through another vision. When it ends, Taniel gasps out a clue. "Follow the tunnels under the old well and you'll find the pillars." We head back to Neibolt Street. Later at the standpipe, Will explains his run-in with the monster. He breaks down how adrenaline and cortisol, the fear hormones, attract certain predators. Rich panics once he realizes Will is saying the creature hunts them for that. Lily steps in with a plan of her own. She grabs some of her mother's pills, the ones Mrs. Bainbridge uses to make her fears fade. The squad now moves around with their own version of defense against the ancient threat. Soon after, in science class at Derry High, the teacher drones on about thousands of worm species on Earth, each one with its own specific function. A snippet shows a snail losing control once infected. The parasite shifts the snail's body and takes over its brain. Margie looks disgusted while she thinks about her new assignment. She wants Lily to believe some jock likes her, so the patty cakes can set up a humiliating stunt in front of everyone. In the restroom, Margie tries to confess she has been plotting behind Lily's back. Before she gets the words out, Margie's eyes pop forward like the snail from Class. She stumbles into the hallway and then into the woodshop, screaming. She drives a chisel into one of her stalk eyes, trying to cut it off. When that fails, she fires up a bandsaw and drags her eyes toward the blade. This scene hits hard and looks brutal on screen. Lily grabs Margie and holds her down before she hurts herself further. Their screams bring a crowd of students running, and they arrive right in time to see Lily covered in Margie's blood, looking like she is attacking her best friend. Episode 3 gave us background on how memories of Derry fade once you stay away. Fans know the general deal, though the show still needs to set the rules inside its version of the story so the kids can build a working plan. They figure out that the same way a farmer fattens livestock before slaughter, pushes children to the highest point of fear before feeding, that rush is the flavor he wants. One risky and interesting detail added in this version is Lily's idea that her mother's Valium lowers fear and tension for each teen. Hard to see that solution landing in the cleanest way, though it adds a twist to the group's approach. Lily's nickname showed up long before the 1966 Rolling Stones track, Mother's Little Helpers, though the song pushed it into mainstream use. King later talked about Valium being part of his struggles during the height of his addictions. The sedative even shaped one of his big sellers from that period, the Tommyknockers. In that story, Bobby tried to force Guard, at gunpoint, to swallow a deadly dose. The scene where Will gets his first close encounter with it while fly fishing, tapping into one of his big fears tied to his dad's plane, getting shot down in Korea. The vision twists one of Pennywise's most famous lines. Instead of the usual, "You'll float too," evil Leroy tells Will he'll burn. Hearing a threat like that underwater feels strange, though it still lands hard. After Leroy notices the scratches on Will's arms, pushing his sense of reality off balance, a red balloon drifts above the water in a slow, ominous way. Halloran's shine-heavy dive into Daniel's memories feels less like an Easter egg and more like a full expansion of the altered origin story shown in Chapter 2's psychedelic moment, where Bill learned about the ritual of Chud. The link matters for this universe, so the show leans into it. In this version, we see Pennywise deadlights arriving on Earth inside a falling star that cracked open on impact. The spirit was loose, though it had nothing to consume until early settlers appeared. Once people filled the area, it grew stronger. Its presence pushed terrified native groups to trap it inside the forest where the star landed. That plan fell apart fast once greedy white settlers rolled in, feeding the monster even more. Eventually, a young indigenous girl and her friends smashed the star's remains into 13 sacred shards. They buried the pieces in a massive circle around the forest, keeping each location hidden so no one would dig them up later. I guess that is what the military is after. Things aren't staying buried, though, as Dick Halloran's abilities cut through this precautions. And now the military wants the shards for their own goals. So good riddance, I guess.